Hello, my name is Matt Levine, and this is my human resource management final presentation. Before I begin, just a little background on myself and the knowledge I have of human resource management coming into this course. So I'm currently a senior, going to be graduating on Saturday. I have never taken a formal human resource class, and whether it be in high school or college. This is the first one I took. I came in with kind of a really not knowing much about what it is, kind of an open mind. Obviously, I've seen The Office. I know the jokes about Toby and all the stuff about that. But besides that, my impression of human resource management and human resource professionals was just that of people who are there in case stuff goes wrong. I really thought of them as like kind of crisis management in a sense. And obviously the onboarding process and the different jobs I've had, you obviously interview with some human resource professionals and stuff like that. But I didn't realize how integral they were to the day-to-day operations of an organization. And as you'll see throughout my presentation, I think the two people I interviewed are great examples of just how integral they are to the day-to-day functions of a company. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first person I interviewed, his name's Camden Schulander. I went to high school with him. He is a year older than me, so he's been working for a little. He graduated a little bit early, so he's been working for a little over a year and a half at Palms Tire. He's a human resource generalist is his official title, and just from briefly talking with him, it's not human resources was not something he considered going into. He didn't come into college with a desire to be in human resource, but it was kind of a class similar to this he took when he was younger in college, his freshman or sophomore year. That kind of piqued his interest and made him realize just how vast human resources is. It's not just like what I thought coming into this class. It's not just the typical, oh, here you're hired and I'll talk to you if you get harassed or if you have a problem at work, something like that. They're more strategists than anything else in some sense. And I think Camden lives through that. So he works at Palms Tires in Green Bay, Wisconsin. He went to WGB. He's from Manitowoc, Wisconsin, same as me. And he's relatively new in the HR world, but he was educated in the modern world where the other person I interviewed, who's my dad, will talk about his interaction with HR, but it differs. And I think that it's important to see that distinction. So one of the questions I asked Camden and I thought had some good answers were what do your day-to-day responsibilities look like? And this kind of builds off what I said about, what exactly do human resource professionals do. So reviewing and updating company policies to ensure compliance with new legislation. This is something that really interested me as a legal student or somebody who will be a legal student, I should say, next year. Legislation and different laws and statutes passed by lawmakers, that you may think, oh, they impact the big companies of the world like Amazon, Microsoft, stuff like that, but you don't think about how they really interact with the small companies like Palms Tires. That's not really, I think, the intended impact from a lot of bills. But um, I just thought it was interesting that even somebody in a small business has to be up to date with all the codes, all the legislations, and consistently learning about that stuff, which is something that really interested me, and I think is a good thing for Camden. Knowing him, he'll be a lifelong learner and something that really fits him. And then update job postings. This is something that a lot of younger human resource professionals will end up doing. It's the easier part of what he does. He said every human resource department in the country probably does this. It's just, if you need an intern, you post it and you basically handle the recruiting side of it. Conduct interviews with candidates, that builds off it. That is something. So when he first started at Pomps, he obviously did not do the interviews because he just got interviewed. So that's something he proved himself from early on that he had the ability to take any personal bias if he knew the person out of it and to really know what the company was looking for and the values they were looking for. And that's something I guess I didn't realize HR professionals were really looking for. Even in the numerous interviews I've done, I never thought of them as kind of they kind of safeguard the company culture to an extent. They are canvassing people to make sure, even if you're overly qualified for a job, that you will fit into what they're trying to do. And I thought that's something that, when Camden said that, it was really interesting because he kind of is responsible with upholding the company culture to an extent. And for him to already be in a position to be conducting interviews with candidates, um, as only working there less than 2 years, I think that's pretty impressive and shows his dedication to the company and his willingness to learn. So next, what are some typical challenges you face? And he said a lot of it A lot of his day to day and the fires he has to put on a day to day would be managing employee relations and ensuring his workforce has the same goals. And that kind of builds off the interviewing. If you interview well, you'll get people that have personalities that will work together. So he says that's kind of the hardest challenge would be getting the people that have been there for 15, 20 years and the new people who grew up completely different, have not many shared experiences, I guess, finding that common ground so they can come together and work for a goal, whatever that may be for Palms Tire. Retaining talent in a competitive market. This was a bigger thing when Camden was an intern. So before 2022, he also worked at Palms Tires. But even he himself, he talked about the different companies. He had numerous offers out of college, and what Pomps did then was like, offer him a more competitive package and the opportunity to grow internally and all these different responsibilities he could take on. Whereas these other companies did not offer a similar package. And that's something he's seen since he's become on full time. They have also done that to people. They value they value their employees, they value loyalty. So retaining talent is something that can really put a company ahead of another one. And I think from what Camden said, Palms Tires does a good job of that, of making their employees feel valued so that they know it's more than just a bunch of guys working independently of each other on their own services. It's a bunch of guys working together for the same company under the same goals to try and come together. And then lastly, just constantly looking to improve. And that's just Camden's nature, and also the nature of a competitive marketplace is you want to be continually improving. You want to be always looking for the next edge, whether it be through new legislation that you can now do something to get a competitive advantage over somebody else, or just doing anything you can to make sure you have a good company culture. So next, which I thought this was what I thought was really interesting. How has your company changed even the short time he's worked there? And he said they've really, you could tell from the time he was an intern to the time he came on full time, they started leveraging the different perspectives of the workforce, leaning into their diverse employees. Palms Tires is a relatively diverse company, especially for Green Bay where they're at. Uh, and instead of looking at that as a, like I mentioned earlier, you have the employees that have been there for 20 years and the employees that have just been hired, and all these people, whether it be different race, religion, sexual orientation, etc. Instead of looking at that as a negative and seeing, oh, these people don't have any common ground, they kind of look at it as, we have all these people with different perspectives and we can get them together and collaborate and come up with the best perspective and the best ideas for our company and our vision and our mission, which I think is something really cool. And it reminded me of, so in chapter 3, I have a quote here: managers who embrace a diverse workforce know individual employees' differences and the contributions made by people of varied abilities are one way to develop a competitive advantage. So there's no real downside to having a diverse workforce and people with a vastly different experiences. They can come together, communicate, and find the best solution to problems that otherwise they might not have been able to answer. All right, my next interview was with my dad, Dave Levine. He's the director of project management at Royston/Hamilton. I'll get into that a little bit. It was formerly Hamilton. Royston recently bought them out, and that was a whole fiasco. The whole situation there. My dad's company, they were gonna completely dissolve and go into a different marketplace with under Royston, but then they decided under his to promote him to the director of project management and let him kind of oversee and overhaul their lab furniture and sheet metal and stuff like that. Kind of let him have control over their, I don't want to call it a rebrand, but their relaunch back into the industry. So a new sales team, a new operations team, while still having the same infrastructure with just varying and reinventing themselves, for lack of a better term. So obviously, like I briefly touched on, there was a Royston bought out Hamilton, which is a huge transaction, and a lot of human resources are involved. So just a couple points my dad made about how the HR was involved in this. They helped integrate new policies with the remaining employees and going through the acquisition. So himself and whatever people at Hamilton stayed on during the acquisition and are now Royston employees. It goes back to just the different cultures and the different different vision and mission companies have. So that reminded me of our reading in chapter 7, training and development, and just sort of the different practices human resource professionals go to depending on what their certain culture is and what they're looking for. And my dad said that was a big point that the Royston HR made sure to do right away. Again, presented clear and concise expectations slash goals for the new partnership. And with any acquisition or any joining a new team, even if you're joining a college basketball team from high school, you're going to be presented with the goals and expectations of a team. So, I'm an athlete. I equate it to that. There was a meeting of the leadership team, my dad and the leaders of Royston, which is based in Georgia. He flies down there from probably once, twice a month, and they go over this. They go over what they want out of this partnership, and they go out of what they want to expect. And I think that was the HR played a big role in kind of setting that relationship and making sure it was a priority for the leadership of the company. And helped implementing strong culture among new coworkers. That kind of relates back to chapter 7 and kind of melting together the two families, the Hamilton employees and the Royston employees now are on the same team. How do you get them to come together? How do you get them to work together? And that was something that human resource did a lot of, whether it be having different employee get-togethers, whether it be a happy hour, whether it be they buy lunch for everybody, whether it be trivia night, whether it be just all these sorts of different things that they did to make sure that the Royston employees and the Hamilton employees felt that they were now just one. They were all now just Royston employees and on the same team and going for the same goals and felt comfortable with each other. All right, so moving on. How do you interact with HR in your position? So, unlike Camden, my dad is not an HR professional, but yet he does deal with them a lot. Main interaction, he said, is through employee performance evaluations. He oversees some people, whether it be the sales team and on the shop floor. He has to make sure that what they're putting out is a good product. So that involves looking at the employees' performance evaluations, stuff like that. Screening new employees and conducting joint interviews. So similar to a lot of people in leadership positions in business, when they take on a new employees, they join HR in an interview, or they let HR vet the person first to make sure they align with their culture, with their goals, with their mission. And then my dad will come on and go from there. But they kind of work together. If he doesn't like a potential candidate, he'll let HR know. If HR doesn't like a potential candidate, they'll let my dad know, stuff like that. They work together and it's really closely knit. Next, we got implementing new company policies and staying up to date on regulations. So similar to Camden, this is kind of the other side of it. The HR professionals who are up to date with these regulations have to tell the people in leadership positions so that they don't break any of these laws or regulations as well. And that, especially where part of my dad's company is is on a factory and the shop floor, there's a lot of moving parts and heavy metal and high temperatures and stuff like that. So that kind of reminded me of chapter 12, promoting safety and health, about how important it is for a company to have a safe and healthy workforce where they know when they're going to go into work and come out of work without an injury, and they can feel safe knowing that the proper regulations and safety practices are in place. So continuing on this conversation, something I'd never really thought of, but my dad told me about, and I was like, oh wow, I never, I didn't realize HR had that. And then obviously in chapter 11, they talked about it there. You can see that. The Human Resource Department of Royston was the 401k liaison. So, my dad is, let me do some math, he's 57 years old. So retirement is on the horizon for him. So for him, rather more than like a 22-year-old, this would be more of importance. Dealt with the transition of retirement plans from Hamilton now into a Royston account, the 401k match, the 401k investments, whatever it may be. The human resource department at Hamilton dissolved or was transitioned into Royston. So now they have to adhere to their company policies, which differed than the Hamilton ones. So the HR people had to explain that to my dad and the other Hamilton employees that stayed on. And, that made me think of chapter 11, employee benefits, about how HR is in charge of that and is in charge of relating it to it. Human resource professionals must be up to date with company policies, especially regarding employee finances. That is something very important that they do, and they must be able to explain it in layman's terms, for lack of a better word. All right, so the conclusion, like I said, coming into this, I didn't have much of an HR background or any formal education in it, but the human resource industry is more dynamic and complex than I ever imagined. When I entered this class, human resource professionals have their hands in all parts of business and are needed for success. And a company without a strong human resource department will struggle. I think that's something just from this class. I realized that human resources really can make or break an organization. You can have the best product in the world, but if your infrastructure is not good, you will inevitably fail. And like if you have a subpar product, you have a strong infrastructure, the human resource department will help bring the production line of it up, and you will find success. So I hope to be in a position where I own a business someday, and I will make human resources a priority. Thank you.